Chapter 1. A scum. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Jing Yu Xian, VIP Suite. When Mu Huan entered the room, the birthday party was at its climax. She pushed the birthday cake in front of the birthday boy and said with a smile, "Master Meng, good day to you. This is a birthday cake that Miss Shasha has painstakingly prepared for you." Isn't Shasha going to break off her engagement with you?" Looking pleased with himself, Master Meng answered, "This is her way of patching up our relationship. She doesn't want to break things off with me." "Wow, you're something, indeed. You were unfaithful during your engagement day, and yet she can still forgive you. That goes without saying. I, for one, have excellent qualities. What's the big deal about me being unfaithful?" Mu Huan opened the gift box to reveal the birthday cake before telling him, "Master Meng, there is a surprise hidden in this birthday cake. Kindly press this button here." The chap saw a gigantic cake shaped in the form of a bikini and grinned lasciviously. He then reached out to press the button. "Master Meng, can I help you to record this beautiful moment of wondrous happiness?" Mu Huan took out her mobile phone. "All right." Master Meng proceeded with a narcissistic pose in front of the phone camera. A loud sound was heard after he pressed the button. A spring stand could be seen popping out of the cake, holding up a card with words written on it. "Meng Zai, I wish you a lifetime of darkness and a desperate end. May sickness befall you with suffering, if not, then may you get a venereal disease. Thank you for your unfaithful act that stopped me from marrying you. This is a small gift of appreciation from me today. Once I find my true love, I'll definitely return the favor generously." Laughter erupted in the VIP suite as someone read out these words from his ex-fiancée. By now, the young man's face had become sullen and ugly. Antagonized, he had reached out to grab the message card when there came another loud bang. The cake exploded without warning and covered his entire face and body with buttery grease. He looked extremely embarrassed now. The laughter escalated louder and grew wilder. After perfectly recording the entire scene, Mu Huan stored her phone and slipped away. What a scumbag. He deserves it. Mu Huan worked for a company called No All Agency, which accepted any request as long as it was not something illegal. Her assignment today was to help Miss Shasha punish her ex-fiancé who was unfaithful to her. Her prank was to disrupt his birthday party and to record his embarrassed look as revenge. Master Meng managed to recompose himself only after she had left. Barking orders in great anger, he said, "Lock down the entire hotel and capture that woman who delivered the cake here. Don't let her get away. I'm gonna punish her the same way she pulled the prank on me." His men inside the VIP suite immediately ran out. The woman, on the other hand, had made a beeline for the washroom behind a bend after she left the room. By the time she exited from it, she had turned into a vampish lady with bright and thick makeup. No one could associate her with the young lady who delivered the cake earlier. She brushed past her pursuers graciously and stopped before the elevator before pressing for lift service. When the elevator arrived, her client, Miss Shasha, happened to send a text message to her at the same time. As she walked into the elevator with her attention fixed on the phone screen, she forgot that she was wearing a stiletto with a sharp, thin heel. As she was unaccustomed to this kind of footwear, the heel was caught between the elevator's door gap and she instinctively flung herself forward and landed into a man's arms. She quickly steadied herself and was about to apologize when the man pushed her aside curtly, as if she was dirt itself. She stumbled a couple of steps backward and almost fell over. She looked up angrily, wanting to see who this unmannered man was. "I didn't do it on purpose." Unfortunately, she got a shock when she looked up. Chapter 2. She is a gentle and virtuous wife. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Bao Junyan. The unmannered man who'd pushed her away was Bao Junyan, her husband. Recomposing herself, she quickly looked down. Originally, at Bao Junyan's royal wife selection ceremony, she had tried her best to suppress her presence. She did not want to be noticed. But it turned out that he wanted a quiet and obedient wife, and she was chosen in the end. As for her, she was forced to bear the identity of his wife and needed to put up an image of a gentle and obedient wife after their marriage. If he were to discover that she was none of those things and that, in fact, she was carrying out assignments like this, he would definitely explode in great fury. Just as she was fretting, a frivolous voice was heard. "Hey, beauty, don't go for my brother Bao. He's married and doesn't like other women touching him. If you want to fling yourself on a man, my arms would always welcome you." Her lips twitched slightly. Well, this fella is so cheeky, isn't he afraid? Wait a minute. If he can utter that, this means that no one has recognized me. Because if he had recognized me, he wouldn't have dared to say this. The chap who spoke earlier was Gong Zai. He was Bao Junyan's friend and the marriage witness at their wedding. Being a frequent visitor of the Bao household, he was the one she was most accustomed to among her husband's friends. If he hasn't recognized me, then does that mean Bao Junyan can't recognize me as well? Feeling lucky, she took a peek secretly at Bao Junyan. He was ignoring her completely. Besides, her makeup was so thick that even her mother would not be able to recognize her. Still, she maintained a low profile just to be safe. Hanging her head low, she muttered inaudibly, sorry. I'll take my leave now." While saying that, she hurriedly pressed the button to open the elevator's door that was about to shut and dashed out without further ado. "Brother Bao, look. You've scared the little beauty," Gong Zai teased his friend as he watched her slip away. Bao Junyan merely kept quiet and glared at him from his periphery. Dipping his head, he suddenly noticed a layer of cosmetic foundation on his coat and frowned disdainfully. How much foundation did that woman apply on her face? Happy to escape unscathed, Mu Huan was able to relax finally. Just then, she heard the sound of the elevator door opening. Thinking that it might be her husband, she fled toward the fire evacuation stairs beside her. Her harried demeanor attracted the attention of her pursuers. She subconsciously knew that she would be attracting unnecessary attention if she continued to run. Moreover, the elevator that opened on her level was not the one that her husband was riding. Hence, she calmed down and told them off tersely. "What are you staring at? Haven't you seen a pretty lady before?" The pursuers looked away sheepishly. She then sauntered away to another elevator. The instruction given to Master Meng's men, who were standing guard at the exit, was to look out for the delivery girl with short hair and in exercise attire. Hence, no one stopped her in her wig and fanciful dress up as she stepped out of the lift. As she reached the exit, she was so alarmed to see Bao Junyan again that she had to cling to the wall to steady herself. This time, he was getting into a car. Without hesitation, she turned her head away and pretended to check her phone. She rushed on her way home only after she'd confirmed that his car had driven far away out of her periphery. By the time her husband reached home, she was already cleaned and washed up. There was no trace of that vampish dress up as she sat tenderly on the couch to do her crocheting. That's right, crocheting. Although it's summer, a gentle and virtuous wife should not be doing nothing. When she saw him coming in, she quickly put down her crochet, walked up to him, passed him his flip-flop, and took the coat he passed to her to hang on the coat hanger. "Hubby, have you had your dinner?" "Yes." "Do you still need to work?" "No, then I'll prepare your bath for you." To prepare for her role as a virtuous wife, she had sought inspiration from novels and drama series. She reckoned that he was satisfied with her performance thus far. By the time she walked to the bathroom, she was positively sure that he had not recognized her this morning. In any case, she felt that he would not have waited to do something to her later at home if he had recognized her inside the elevator at the first instant. Still, that did not make her any less worried. Chapter 3. Accustomed. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. One should know that despite his unrivaled, god-like appearance, the man did not have the magnanimity of a god. In fact, he was as cold-blooded, heartless, and vicious as rumored. Hence, she could not help but worry that he might have seen through her disguise. Now, however, she could finally put her worries aside. The carefree woman cheerfully hummed a tune as she bent down to run the bath for her husband. Bao Junyan found his little wife swaying along to the beat of the song when he entered the bathroom. When the sound of flowing water ceased after she turned off the tap, she suddenly sensed that something was amiss and instinctively looked past her shoulder. She received quite a rude shock when she noticed him standing behind her. She hastily bowed her head. The bath is ready. With the earlier incident on her conscience, she did not dare to face him, and so, she took her leave right away after saying that. The man knitted his brows slightly. The fact that she was overly timid aside, he was generally quite satisfied with this new wife of his. She would always hang her head low when speaking to him and, like a frightened little bunny, would want to escape at the sight of him. As she passed by him, he reached out to pull the woman into his embrace. She suddenly became nervous. Under the light, a blush bloomed across her fair and clean face out of her shyness. That rosy face instinctively reminded him of that unknown woman with thick makeup whom he encountered at the elevator earlier. He had thrown his coat away because of that makeup stain left behind by her. Don't you wear thick makeup in the future? His wife was better off looking all natural and clean. Mu Huan. What did he mean by that? What's his reason for saying this? Did he? The next day, when Mu Huan got awakened by her grumbling stomach, she found the space beside her had long been emptied. She then nonchalantly got up to wash herself. She could still recall herself crying the entire day when she woke up in this place for the first time. She had never imagined that her marriage would turn out like this, that she would need to sacrifice her happiness just to live on. And so, she broke down badly in tears that day. So what if she had never expected such a life? Also, what could crying do? It helped nothing at all. For a long time now, she was no longer the Mu family's little princess who was showered with love by her parents. No one would ever feel heartache for her or get anxious over her tears and help her resolve everything anymore. Chapter 4. Should be returned to her. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. And so, she would, like now, wake up with a sore body, wash herself, and take her breakfast before heading to work with a full stomach. Only money could resolve all the problems she now faced. When Mu Huan was finally ready to head downstairs to the dining room for her breakfast, she found Butler Li approaching her with her grandmother and sister trailing behind him. Instantly, her mood plummeted and her appetite was lost. "Young mistress, your grandmother and sister are here." The butler had actually informed the two guests to wait downstairs in the living room while he went up to inform his young mistress. Alas, he did not expect them to follow him up. Even though they behaved very rudely on their part, he could not say anything about it as they were close relatives of the young mistress. At the sight of her, old Mrs. Mu stepped forward and, with a face of indulgence, exclaimed, "Darling, you've lost so much weight. Haven't you been taking proper meals? Look what Grandma brought you." Butler Li. What is this old lady talking about? She's making it seem like the Baos have been abusing young mistress. The old woman's pretentious concern disgusted Mu Huan, but she sent the butler away to busy himself with his other chores. As soon as the latter left, her grandmother immediately dropped her act. The young lady behind her, on the other hand, eagerly charged forward and grabbed her collar. "*TCH, you've been seducing my Junyan again." Summer clothes usually had low collars, so the marks Bao Junyan left on Mu Huan's body last night could faintly be seen. This drove her mad with jealousy. How she wished she could rip that B*TCH's clothes apart and have those hickeys transferred to her body. All these should have belonged to me. They're all supposed to be mine. Back then, every family in Yuncheng with daughters of a suitable age received a matchmaking invitation from the Baos. And so, in order to increase the chances of becoming in laws with the Baos, the Mu family sent not only Mu Kersen there but also forced Mu Huan back to attend this matchmaking session. Afraid that marriage would become a stumbling block in her path to stardom, the former was very reluctant to attend the session and, thus, she left with her mother, who was unwilling to force her against her will, before the man could even show up. After Mu Huan was selected to become Bao Junyan's wife and upon seeing how rich and handsome he was, she immediately regretted her decision and insisted that the other woman file a divorce with him so that she could marry him instead. She felt that the man was hers. If she had not left midway, she would surely have been the one selected and married to him. The woman who was having her collar tugged at frowned in disdain as she grabbed the other's hands and flung them aside. Mu Kersen stumbled to the ground and practically went mad with anger. How dare this B*TCH push me? What about it? Taunted Mu Huan condescendingly. B*TCH. She's the one who's a downright the core B*TCH, alright. Look at her, Grandma, she screeched. Alas, the old lady not only did not chide Mu Huan, but rather, she harshly reprimanded her. Silence. Usually well behaved, this granddaughter of hers could simply not keep her temper in check when she met Mu Huan. In the face of her stern rebuke, the young woman no longer dared utter a sound. Only when the latter quietened down did the old lady look at Mu Huan and ordered, "Both your father and I think you should return Junyan to your sister. So we want Kersen to move in here to stay while you help her to claim his heart." Noel.n. Chapter 5. Bottom line continuously hitting a new low. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. It was not only Mu Kersen who thought that the man was hers. The rest of the family did so as well. Still, they knew that it was impossible for such a man like Bao Junyan to marry as told. Therefore, they came up with the idea of letting her stay in his house first to get closer to the man while Mu Huan tried to match them together. Once he developed feelings for Mu Kersen, the other woman would then step down from her title as his wife and let the former replace her. She was struck dumb when she got what the elder woman was saying. Out of all the thick-skinned people she had met before, her grandmother was the worst one of all. She had been unwilling to attend the matchmaking session from the start but was forced to do so when they threatened her with her granny's safety. Now, however, everything was destroyed just because Mu Kersen wanted to marry her rich and handsome husband. The latter shamelessly saw the man as hers and demanded that she return the man to her. She could understand the reason behind her brainless sister's absurd behavior and illogical thinking, but what she could not get was how her grandmother and father actually thought the same, too. Just what exactly was on their mind? How did they come to the conclusion that Bao Junyan belonged to Mu Kersen? Where did they get the confidence to reckon that he would surely choose her sister after choosing her? Also, even though she did not want to admit this at all, Mu Kersen was her half-sister. This meant that the man was her brother-in-law. Never mind that they did not find it shameless and not stop her from climbing onto her brother-in-law's bed, but they even encouraged her, his wife, to help her sister climb onto her own husband's bed. D****. She felt a burning urge to spew vulgarities at them. God***nit. That's it. Grandma, even though I know that you're used to being so thick-skinned and shameless, you've gone too far this time. There are some lines that one, as a human, shouldn't cross. It felt like her bottom line had been continuously hitting a new low. Did you hear what she's saying, Grandma? She dared to call you thick-skinned and shameless. Mu Kersen immediately grasped the chance to complain to her grandmother. The elderly woman's face darkened at that. Mu Huan, it looks like you don't wish for your granny to get better. Ever since her mother's demise and her stepmother marrying into the family, she and her granny had been relying upon each other throughout the years. Alas, her granny had suffered a stroke and had been in a coma since early this year. Now, she lay in the hands of the Mu family. The hands hanging down by her sides got balled tight. Well, weren't you very reluctant to marry Bao Junyan? I'm giving you the chance now to leave him. You should cooperate with us since I'm fulfilling your wish. The old Mrs. Mu softened her tone and hit her right at her sore spot with her words. After you help Kursin marry Junyan, I'll give you a house and let your granny continue to receive the best treatment in the hospital. Both of you will be well taken care of for the rest of your lives. Do you still think of me as that young and naive girl who'll believe everything you say? Mu Huan sneered. Give me a house and let Granny continue to receive the best treatment in the hospital. Ha! By then, this old woman will only have kicked Granny out of the hospital and cut off all means of my survival to exterminate any possible future threats. You'll do as told, whether you believe it or not. Don't think yourself all capable now that you've married and fulfilled marital duties to Junyan. Do you think you can continue to be Mrs. Bao if those things reach his hand? The old woman, who had gotten used to taking an aggressive stance when dealing with Mu Huan, could not even be bothered baiting her with gains and simply straight out threatened her. She had long ago made preparations should her granddaughter defy her after marrying the man. After Mu Huan got selected, she drugged the woman and kept irrefutable photos and medical records of hers. If Bao Junyan were to know of such things, he would definitely not let her off. If her granddaughter were to obediently hand over her status as Mrs. Jiang, she would let her and her granny off just fine. However, should she choose to go against her instead, then the two of them would be goners. Chapter 6. Perish Together. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios, do as you deem fit, then. But do you really think that I'll be the only one who will be kicked away if those things reach his hands, sneered Mu Huan. The things in her grandma's hands could indeed suppress her, strip her of her title, and infuriate Bao Junyan. However, to him, she was the Mu's representative. If she got into trouble, the rest of the family would surely be, too. Once you hand over those things to him, you can forget about letting Mu Kursin marry him. In fact, the Mu family will be finished as well. Despite being surprised by her words, the older woman calmly countered, do you think I haven't considered this point? Since I dare to do so, then I have the confidence to retreat unscathed. Oh. Give them to him, then, and let me see just how you retreat unscathed, she nonchalantly retorted. Think about your granny, Mu Huan. The elderly Mrs. Mu's face instantly turned eerily cold. We're on the same boat here. It'll be beneficial for us if we don't cross each other's bottom line. If you insist on forcing me against my will, then I don't mind letting us perish together. As the saying goes, he who's down needs fear no fall. Since Grandma isn't afraid at all, I'll muster up my courage as well. For the sake of her granny, she was willing to be restrained by them, but no way was she going to help that half-sister of hers to marry her husband. Should Mu Kursin gain Bao Junyan's favor, she would instantly become a deserted pawn. By then, not only could she not save her granny, but she would forever be subject to the Mu family's riding roughshod over her. The old Mrs. Mu knew that her granddaughter meant every word she said. She had the same temperament as her granny, which was why she disliked this granddaughter so much. After a moment of rumination, she conceded, I can invite over that American specialist you mentioned previously for your granny on the condition that you let Kursin move into your place. Never mind if you don't help her, but don't you dare play any tricks and get in the way of her plans. This is my biggest concession. She can move in after that specialist has arrived and met my granny for a diagnosis. Mu Huan had no problem with that at all. Without her stepping in, she still had all sorts of ways to get her sister discreetly kicked out of the house. Kursin will be moving in today. I'll get someone to send her luggage over later in the afternoon. By then, you'll need to tell the Bows that you want your sister's companionship, declared her granny firmly. Before she could say something about it, the former continued, Xiao Huan, you should know that letting your granny suffer during nursing without crossing the bottom line is something very easy to do. This was a warning to her. Even though she had a card in her hand, the former was the one who had an upper hand. She clenched her fists tightly at that. As Mu Kurson got to her feet, she taunted, Mu Huan, you'd better not play any dirty tricks to stop me unless you truly want your granny dead. Otherwise, your granny will be the one suffering real good. Mu Huan would only choose to perish together with them as a last resort. After all, they were not worth staking her life and that of her granny over. So, before she could amass enough capability and money to leave this place with her granny, she needed to put up with their nonsense. The former moved into her place that very day, and when she called her husband to inform him of this matter, the man simply said that she could make the decisions regarding their home affairs on her own. BDNV speaking of this husband of hers, she found him to be a rather good person. He basically left her alone to do whatever she wanted. All he asked for was for her presence at home when he returned and for her cooperation in matters of love. At the request of her grandmother, she invited the man to come home for dinner as well. Mu Kurson spent the entire afternoon making preparations for a stunning entrance for Bao Junyan. At dinner time, she appeared at the dining table dressed in a super short dress with a deep V cut. Chapter 7. Face resembling mother, body resembling father. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Seeing that her were almost bulging out of her clothes, Mu Huan realized that she was rather relentless. She was not afraid of getting sweat rash on such a hot summer day. Her half-sister had a face that resembled her mother and a body that resembled their father. From the looks of it, she must have put at least 3 thick layers of bra padding in order to have such a push-up effect. Why haven't Junyan returned yet? After inquiring about their dinner time, Mu Kurson made it a point to come down late, creating the effect of a grand entrance so that the man's gaze would instinctively land on her. Unfortunately for her, the man had yet to return even though she had already come down this late. No idea. The other woman shrugged her shoulders. She very nearly flew into a rage on the spot. Alas, the butler walked in on them right then, so she could only put a lid on her anger. Young mistress, Pa Wang called to inform us that young master has an urgent matter to settle and needs to leave for abroad. Hence, he won't be able to come back and dine with you. What? She could not help exclaiming at that. Can't come back for dinner. Won't all the effort I've spent this afternoon be in vain, then? How can it turn out this way? The butler frowned in contempt at the sight of her clothes when he regarded her. Did Pa Wang say for how long he will be overseas? That was what Mu Huan was most concerned about. With her husband spending a long time abroad, she could have a free hand in arranging her work schedule sans any worries. About a week, respectfully replied the butler. Yea. She hung her head low to hide her irrepressible high spirits. In contrast to her happy state, her sister was devastated. A week. Bao Junyan will be abroad for a whole week. What's the point in staying here when he's not around? If I leave now, though, what excuse can I find to move in again? D****. If I'd known about this, I would have surely moved in several days later. She looked at Mu Huan, who had her head bowed, and caught sight of the marks on her skin, which reminded her of how the married couple had rolled about in the sheets last night. She could have stunned the man today, but alas, she did not even manage to get a glimpse of him. This made her even more infuriated. As soon as the butler left, the enraged woman picked up the pot of chicken soup from the table and flung it at her sister. Thank God for Mu Huan's quick reflexes. Otherwise, that pot of hot soup would surely have hit her face. It would have left her face scalding red for days, if not disfigured. Even so, a good amount of soup was splashed onto her bare arm, and it hurt a lot. Furious, she shot up right away, picked up a plate of vegetables, and approached the other. Mu Huan, your granny will be in for a good suffering if you dare touch me. Mu Kurson threatened. Touch me if you dare. She merely responded by clamping down on her shoulder and sending the plate of vegetables into her face. If you dare do that, it'll be hot oil over your head next time. You'll be disfigured. She did not fear this sister of hers. The one making decisions in the family was her grandma, who had the feudal view of esteeming men above women. If she were to hurt her half-brother, the elderly woman would probably deal with her harshly. As for Mu Kurson, however, she would only weigh her pros and cons and would not do anything to her if she still had her usefulness. When the other woman started screaming, she put a hand over her mouth and said, "Behave yourself if you want to remain here for a chance to marry Bao Junyan. Wise up. Don't antagonize me." Her patience was limited. Chapter 8. Confrontation between enemies. 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Mu Kurson couldn't shout. She was going berserk from feeling all sticky and disgusting. Tramp. Just wait and see, when she marries Bao Junyan, she would make sure that she dies in the ugliest way possible. 3 days later, at a back alley behind a night bar. Are delinquent girls nowadays all playing with such high stakes? Li Meng asked in disbelief as she saw the other gang bringing over more than 20 people, some even carrying wooden clubs. Mu Huan furrowed her eyebrows slightly. I'll try to convince Xiaoying to leave. If she refuses and you sense that something is wrong during the fight, retreat immediately. That goes the same for you as well. Don't lose your life just because of money. Li Meng said while looking at her. After graduating from university, Mu Huan had made plans to have enough money and capability to bring her maternal grandmother away from Yunqing district and into another city to live, completely breaking away from the Mu family. Therefore, she worked extremely hard just for money. As long as they were not illegal activities, she would accept them. Bedo to them a few days ago, Li Meng and Mu Huan had received a request to protect a delinquent girl. That is, they had to disguise themselves as rebellious delinquent girls and mix into the gang to secretly protect Xiaoying. Thereafter, they needed to gradually make her understand that mixing with these delinquents was neither a cool nor a good matter. Instead, it was a dangerous and bad decision she made. Today, Xiaoying and her gang had been asked to take part in a fight. Initially, they thought that it would just be a catfight between the girls and a small-scale physical battle. However, they didn't expect to see so many people, with some even carrying wooden clubs. Just as Mu Huan was about to head up front and advise Xiaoying, both gangs began to fight. Xiaoying was even the first to dash forward. This girl is really something. Mu Huan dashed forward as she witnessed the situation. Li Meng followed closely after her. Mu Huan rushed forward and held on to the girl Xiaoying was fighting with as she urged Xiaoying to run. Xiaoying refused to leave no matter what. I can't run away. I cannot leave my sisters behind. Loyalty was the most important value to those who mingled in the streets. The corners of Mu Huan's lips twitched unconsciously. Some people had no choice but to fight for their lives just to survive. Xiaoying was wealthy and had parents who loved her very much, yet just because she found her easy and comfortable life too boring, she decided that she wanted to live like those underworld girls that she had seen in movies. She even gathered a bunch of hooligans who stuck with her due to her wealth and her willingness to spend money on them, and she treated them like die-hard sisters as seen in the movies. As she thought of an idea, Mu Huan released her grip and let Xiaoying dash forward. Li Meng, who had finally caught up to them, was left in shock. Are we not grabbing her and escaping? Sometimes, constant protection is useless. We need to let her witness the cruelty of this world. That way, she wouldn't be so naive. It was just like her. If she had not seen her paternal grandma's cruelty, she would have never believed that there would be a day that she would ever treat her this way. Even though the process was very painful, that pain was way better than being a fool and being harmed by others. Li Meng felt that she had a point. Therefore, the two of them skillfully left the violent commotion but stood close enough to Xiaoying to ensure that she was safe. When Mu Huan saw that someone had taken out a knife, she hastily ran toward Xiaoying. At that moment, Xiaoying was helping her sisters to fight another gang member. Suddenly, she was tugged forward by her sisters. Initially, she was a little dumbstruck. Then, she saw the opposite gang member running toward her with a knife. It was at that moment that she realized her sisters were only using her as a shield against that knife. Her eyes widened in complete astonishment. As she was too stunned and scared, she was completely motionless. She could only watch the other party swing the knife in her direction. Chapter 9. Confrontation between enemies. 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. As it was now a matter of life or death, Mu Huan kicked the armed girl away from Xiaoying and pulled her to the side. Xiaoying was trembling from the shock. She honestly thought she was going to die. Are you going to run now? Mu Huan looked at her. Xiaoying shivered, unable to speak. She could only grab hold of Mu Huan's hand tightly. She had always been protected by her family very well since she was young and had never encountered such a dangerous situation before. When she came out to mingle, she had only been spending money on a bunch of sisters, eating and drinking while speaking in some coarse language. This was her first time fighting. Initially, she was very happy and excited as she was finally going to be in one of those scenes in the movies. Therefore, she'd been the first to rush forward. But who'd have known? Mu Huan didn't say much as she pulled Xiaoying and ran off. But now, they wouldn't be able to escape just because they wanted to. The opposing gang refused to let anyone off just like that. You take Xiaoying and leave first, I'll follow along at the back. Mu Huan handed Xiaoying over to Li Meng, then dealt with the people who had chased after them. Be careful. Li Meng knew that Mu Huan was a better fighter than she was. Therefore, she didn't waste her breath to say much more as she pulled Xiaoying along to escape. Xiaoying's gang were no match to the opposing gang at all. Soon, only a few were left standing. As much as Mu Huan hated battles, she wasn't able to get away from it this time. In the suite at the top level of the bar, sipping on his alcohol, Josei noticed the commotion happening below them. Thereafter, he yelled, "Brother Bao, come here quick and have a look." Bao Junyan looked over, only to see a bunch of delinquent girls fighting. He retracted her gaze and glanced coldly at Josei. What's so great about watching a group of delinquents fighting? Josei smiled brightly. There's nothing to do anyway. Bao Junyan ignored him as he continued to drink. Josei looked out the window and continued to watch the fight with keen interest. Brother Bao, look. This girl is really good. She's fighting 7 to 8 people by herself, and it seems like she hasn't put in all her effort yet. Bao Junyan did not look over. He wasn't interested in looking at those girls dressed in strange clothes with monstrous and messy make-up. Below, Mu Huan was getting a little pissed with being beaten. Just as she was about to pick up a wooden bat in retaliation, she heard the sound of the siren. Someone shouted loudly, "The police are here." The 7 to 8 girls who had been beating Mu Huan began to panic right at that moment. Mu Huan took the opportunity to escape. The girls began to go after her. Mu Huan wasn't sure if they were doing so because they wouldn't let her off or if they were just escaping in the same direction as her. Mu Huan managed to catch up to Li Meng and Xiaoying, with the girls still chasing them from the back. The three of them began to run like their lives depended on it. Only after running for 2 whole streets did they finally manage to shrug those girls off. The 3 exhausted individuals stopped by the roadside as they tried to catch their breaths. A black car zoomed past them, not even slowing down when it went over a puddle, thus splashing filthy water all over their faces while they were catching a break. The three of them were stunned. Li Meng could taste the muddy water in her mouth as she yelled angrily about the driver's inadequacy. Mu Huan had initially wanted to send Xiaoying home first, but she couldn't take the dirty water on her face. She walked toward a car that was parked in front and looked at her reflection against the car window, wanting to wipe her face clean before sending Xiaoying back. Then, just as she was about to take a wet cloth to wipe her face, the car window was rolled down slowly as an ethereally handsome face came into view. Mu Huan was stunned. She stumbled backward in shock, nearly falling but first on the ground. Bao Junyan. Why was he here? Didn't he say he'd be overseas for a week? Witnessing the situation, Li Meng wanted to dash forward to ask her what's wrong. But when she saw Bao Junyan sitting in the car, she took a few steps back in fear. Chapter 10. It's time to run now. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Bao Junyan saw the horrid expressions on their faces. They do realize that they look more horrible than me, right? Both Mu Huan and Li Meng had dressed up to the image of a flapper. Not only were their faces dolled up in exaggerated gothic look, but they also had their wigs on and wore blue-tinted contact lenses. Moreover, they had smudged the bright red rouge on their lips as they unconsciously scratched their faces earlier to remove the muddy stains. Thus, the two of them looked like they were getting ready for a Halloween party instead. Li Meng glanced at Mu Huan, sending distress signals with her eyes. She was Mu Huan's best friend and knew that Mu Huan had always performed the role of a virtuous wife after her marriage. Now that her husband happened to catch them in such a get-up, she would be doomed. Mu Huan forced herself to stay calm. Recalling how she managed to escape his attention last time, she knew that it would be even more difficult for him to recognize her this time with her thick makeup and exaggerated look. Hence, she determined that the time to run was now. After catching Li Meng's eyes, the two of them grabbed hold of Xiaoying on each side and took off with their lives. Pa Wang happened to catch them fleeing as he returned to the car after finishing with his business. This scene caught him by surprise. After all, women would fling themselves on the president no matter where he went. But this time around, the girls were actually running away as fast as they could from him. After he got into the car, he could not contain his curiosity and asked Bao Junyan, CEO, what happened to those girls? They have a guilty conscience. Although the man could not recognize his wife, he could tell that she was not in the right frame of mind. No matter what, he could not imagine that rebellious-looking girl with atrocious makeup was actually his doleful wife. In his heart, there was no way his obedient, gentle, lovely, and timid wife could dress up in such a manner to roam the streets at night. Upon recalling a few cases where girls were reported to steal things in cars after smashing the windows, Pa Wang asked, "President, do you want to go after them?" "No. Let's go to the factory now." To him, these were just a few naive and ignorant girls who had chosen to walk down the wrong path in life and deserved no attention from him. There was no need to investigate further. Mu Huan and Li Meng haphazardly dragged Xiaoying all the way through several alleys before they finally stopped. The little lass had reached her physical limit by then and could hardly stand up when they reached the final stop. Leaning against the wall, she slid down to the ground before bursting out after a long pause, "I'm never ever going to come out to roam the streets again. Why did I even think of this idea in the first place? Was it because my phone was not interesting enough, or the games weren't fun enough? Or, perhaps, it wasn't comfortable just lying on my bed with my tidbits? Why was I so stupid as to suggest this idea in the first place?" Not only did she almost lose her life, now, her legs were even about to give way from running too much. "I'll never, ever want to roam the streets again. It isn't a good idea at all." The two girls looked at each other when they heard what she just told them. The tiresome and frightening experience tonight was well worth the price in exchange for her enlightenment. After they sent Xiaoying home, the two of them returned to Li Meng's house. I can't believe that Bao Junyan couldn't recognize you. Li Meng retrieved a can of cola from the fridge and threw it to her friend. Do you think you can recognize me from that makeup if you hadn't known that it was me in the first place? She asked in return, cocking a brow. Sizing her up, Li Meng had to agree. That's true. Still, I have to ask. Have you seriously not considered being with him for the rest of your life? He's so good looking. Every time I see him, I'm reminded of how fortunate you are to be selected by this man to sleep next to him. Mu Huan. Is my friend in the right frame of mind? No matter what, I'm a young and invincible beauty. Why am I the one to gain by sleeping with an uncle? Xiao Huan, think about it. It'll be stupid to lose a man like Bao Junyan who has such good looks.